All right, what's the question today?
Um, so in traditional Japanese martial arts like karate, there's been a tradition within that culture of kind of sport fighting. You know, like the kumite, and that's kind of always been their thing. Um, and with the Korean martial arts, Taekwondo, it was turned into a sport pretty quickly, and uh, UFC, mixed martial arts, was introduced to Japan. You know, soon after it kind of popped off here, maybe even before the sport fighting was big in the United States, it was big in Japan. But it hasn't really popped off like that in China until recently. Like the MMA is actually just being introduced to China, and I feel that the sport fighting isn't like really in traditional Chinese martial arts like it is in the Japanese martial arts. Why do you think that is, and how do you think the influx of MMA into China is going to start to change and affect the traditional Chinese like martial art culture that doesn't really, to my knowledge, promote the sport fighting like the Japanese martial arts do?
So the first question is why um, the Chinese martial arts is not going towards that compared to the Japanese martial arts?
Right, right.
Um, Hold on, let me see what that is.
Okay.
I'll be right back. I'll leave it running.
Okay.
You asked me the question. All right. So as far as my knowledge is concerned, I believe the martial arts started from China. Um, Fighting has started way before. Like it could be anywhere, Rome or wherever. But I'm talking about martial arts. I'm not talking about just military, just warfare. I'm talking about martial arts where you turn it into more of a spiritual practice. Like that's where it started, China. And if you look into the history, I mean, I don't know that much about the history, but I know enough to know that the Japanese call karate, the original meaning of it is the Chinese fist. So if you look at China, it's such a huge territory, and you look at Japan, it's so small compared to China. It's almost the size of California compared to like the United States. So it's just a question of like territory. But China is, when you think about the East, you think about China because it's such a powerful influence. So you think about America, you think about China. Japan is a part of the East. Now Japan is just kind of like, the Japanese do is they always take from the Chinese and then they try to make it their own, so then they can make themselves separated from them. So, but China is the foundation. So China has turned martial arts into not just for war and military and self-defense and combat, but also into spiritual practice. Now, the Japanese, even their language system is based off of the Chinese. They would just switch it up to make it their own. Same thing with Korea. Because you look at how small Korea is, look at how small Japan is, look at how big China is, and how much of a big influence they have. And the Koreans and the Japanese would take from China and then they try to make it their own. So when you try to make something your own, you obviously can't have it too similar to what it already is. Otherwise, then why would somebody look for you when they could just go to the foundation? So if they see China and they're more spiritual with their martial arts, then they're going to be, okay, let's make this different. So we got to make it more aggressive, more violent, more entertaining. And then they become known for that. And then that creates the appeal for the people that are more naturally inclined towards the aggressive nature of the martial arts. So it's more of, and even the style of dress, like even the uniforms, you could totally different. Like the Chinese would have the frog buttons with their kung fu uniforms. There's no belts. It's just like a silk and like the Tai Chi, or just very, looks like almost like a suit, like a business suit, like very professional looking. But the Japanese would have the gis, they would have the belts, the ranks, and then they would have the one over the other, it's clearly different. So they would make their uniform like, so then you could see, okay, that's a Japanese uniform, that's a Chinese uniform. They can't make it look like that, otherwise they're gonna be, you know, criticized or blamed for like copycatting something that's not original. You know, so they would make their own. So Chinese is spiritual, okay, let's be unspiritual. Okay, the Chinese have this uniform, okay, let's have that uniform. And there's conflict, the Chinese and Japanese, and even maybe the Koreans. I mean, for as far as I know, you know, they would have, maybe some of the Japanese would view themselves as like more of upper than, and then the Chinese as lower, because China is so big that there's going to be more poverty there, you know, and then it's like kind of America trying to compare themselves to Mexico. Oh, you know, we're better because we're more economically developed. So then they would try to look at themselves as higher. So the Japanese they have such a small country, they could try to build it to be very wealthy and then look at all the Chinese as like slaves to them. And even if you look at even further, you know, into the history of the war, you would see like what, you know, as far as I know, like the rape of Nanking or something like that, where the Japanese would go in there and just to slaughter a bunch of Chinese people, trying to overtake the territory to try to make more of it their own. And even the Japanese would even try to do that with the Pearl Harbor, trying to fight with America, you know. And then America came back with atom bombs into Japan, and then Japan backed off of America, be like, look, we can't mess with y'all. We bow down to you guys. And that's why Japanese and Americans are more like friends, because they're like, oh, you know, you did Pearl Harbor to us, but we did all this atomic bombing to you guys. And then now the Japanese just bow down to the Americans to be like, look, you guys are number one, but we still feel that we're above the Chinese, so we're still going to view them with distaste. And I'm not saying like every Japanese person, but I'm just saying that when you bring history into it, you can see the conflict, you know, and it kind of shows in the martial arts. If you look at all the martial arts films from China, most of Bruce Lee's films, they're always fighting against the Japanese. There's some conflict there. Even with the Ip Man series, they're showing the conflict between the Chinese and the Japanese. There's always this conflict between the Chinese and the Japanese. That's like a big theme in Chinese martial arts movies, because it's based off the history. If you don't study the history and you don't understand, you just be like, why are they beefing? But it's just like, you know, this is their history. I don't live in China, I don't live in Japan, but I'm just looking at it from the outside, and I see the conflict. And it is resembled in the martial arts is pretty much Japanese. It was pretty much the MMA at that time for, you know, in the martial arts within that realm. Right. Now MMA is pretty much like an American branded thing to say, okay, we're going to be more destructive than what the Japanese were doing. So it's basically like MMA is kind of like the Japanese were kind of bullying the Chinese, because the Chinese were kind of like more like educated, more scientific, more spiritual, not so much about the fighting. And then you got the Japanese be like, you know, you guys are weak, you know, like we got to do it more aggressive, more violent, like we're going to compete and we're going to beat up all you guys. So they're trying to be like kind of like a bully. But then the America comes in and be like, you know what, we're even a bigger bully than you guys. We got this whole MMA thing. We could hit people on the ground. We could choke them out. We could kill people. And our sport is more violent than you guys. Karate ain't shit because you guys can't even ground fight. You guys can't even punch to the face. But we're going to do all that. So America is saying like, oh, you know, we're a bigger bully than the Japanese. And the Japanese will still saying, well, okay, we're not as big as bully as you guys, but we're still better. We're more of a bully for the, oh, you know, we're gonna kind of bully in the Chinese. So it's kind of like I see like the aggressiveness is kind of like America, Japan, China, you know, and then maybe India, because India doesn't even practice martial art techniques like the Chinese. So India kind of turned their martial art techniques and transformed it into yoga, which is more like just stretching and meditation. So you got India is known to be very spiritual. Like, I mean, that's where Buddha came from, Hinduism, and they have a long history of like very much spiritual practices. They're known for yoga. So it's like yoga, I mean, India's probably the most peaceful as it gets. And then the Chinese are kind of integrating the combat with peace, and then they turned martial arts. And then the Japanese became more of combat sport. And then now America comes in, it's not even combat sport, it's just straight violence. So it's just like a curriculum that, I mean, you see the different levels. And they're all different because if the America comes in and, okay, let's create our own thing, call it cage fighting, but have the same exact rules as the karate, then it doesn't set them apart. They'll be like, why watch this? They already have that. So even the Thailand comes with the Thai boxing. They got their own set of rules. So every single country is trying to set their own brand, their own uniqueness to make it so then it draws attention to something different. So, Thailand has their Thai boxing, Japan has their karate, America has their cage fighting. China is their spiritual practices within the martial arts, Tai Chi, and just basically just street combat, no rules, but with spirituality. So the Chinese are always going to be known for the integration between the yin and the yang. That's what the Chinese martial arts will always be known for. Now, the American might try to come in there and try to change it up and to make it more of a Japanese type of feeling or more of an American type of thing, but it's like almost like a Christian missionary trying to go into China to change all the bunch of Buddhists into Christians. Now, they could have an influence, but I really doubt that they're going to convert the whole country into Christianity or convert the whole country into this glorification of violence. I mean, they even go in there with McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and all that stuff. But from what I've read in recent articles, the Chinese are like they're kind of being repelled by the unhealthiness, so they're drawn away from that, and then they're starting to go out of business. Some of those chains. So it's like when they're so used to a certain way, and something different comes in, it might have an appeal, and it might last for a few years. But I think eventually they're going to come back to understand and appreciate more what they have originally than what the new thing that's coming in that's trying to change them. But I don't live in China, so if they get more into the MMA, the cage fighting, it doesn't really. It's not. I don't live there, but it's not really. I don't even care. I mean, if that happens to them, then I'm still representing a different way in the martial arts within myself, within my own school, and the school is in America. It's just that my values are not American values as a whole, because everybody's so different than what I'm trying to represent. But China is not necessarily representing everything that I would embrace in the martial arts either. They have these Shaolin monks that are doing it in a certain way, and thousands of people practicing in the same form, and they have a certain way of doing things that even Bruce Lee was kind of speaking against, and he's like, this is just too much like a dance. It's not real. It's not real enough. It's not like even the martial arts film, they have him hanging by wires. He didn't like all that. I want more. He's like, I want more realism. I want something that actually works. Bruce Lee had to step away from the mold of the traditional Chinese. So I'm not saying, everything in China is what I agree with, because there's certain things about China that I want to make better. Mm-hmm. And then there's certain things about America that I want to make better, and I have to make my own. So I'm not going to really side with either or, because, I'm in the right position to do that because I was born in America, so I'm considered American. It's just that my roots and my parents were born in China. So I'm kind of like connected to both, but it's not right for me to choose either. It's just more about choosing the best of what I see and making it my own. And that's kind of what the Japanese tried to do with the Chinese martial arts. Let's see what they have and try to make it better according to our eyes. But there's a violent aspects to certain expression of the martial arts in Japan, but certain expressions like Aikido, for example, the founder was about peace. I mean, it's supposed to be the art of peace. So he saw the problems with the overexpression of violence within the martial arts systems in Japan, and he decided to create his own system that's more about peace. So it doesn't mean that every single Japanese person in there is a promoter of violence. I mean, there's going to be there's actually, from what I know, they preserved like meditation practices and the art of Zen that were destroyed in China, because they had to go through China to get to Japan. And China, during certain periods of like the communist regime or whatever, they would destroy these ancient teachings of spirituality, and Japan would be the ones that would retain it. So then it's almost like certain parts of Japan should be thanked, because they actually promoted the peacefulness and the meditation. I mean, Japan is known for Zen, you know, and even that movie, The Last Samurai, I enjoyed the movie because of the message that it's trying to give you. You know, like Tom Cruise is in between like this spiritual martial arts, and then the Americans or the Europeans or whatever coming in to try to destroy all the Japanese samurais and just completely obliterate their culture or whatever, their people, and then they're trying to retain the spirituality. So there's just certain parts, certain, you know, people that were leading Japan that might have been leading it towards a more violent path. But it doesn't mean that the essence of Japan was that. It might just be that the leadership was off. Just like right now, as Americans, we are, you know, we hold certain values, but then now we're being represented by Donald Trump. And you know, they're saying the majority of the Americans don't agree with some of the things that he's doing or saying, but then he's the one who's in power, and then say he decides to just, you know, go through all-out war. Now everybody looks at Americans, looks at me, looks at you, and everybody that lives in America in a certain way because of the decisions of this person, you know. So I recognize the good qualities of Japan, you know, but it's just in regards to the martial arts, they're not known to their main thing is not about integrating yin and yang the way the Chinese are. Like the Chinese martial arts are known for that balance, and then the Japanese, they're known more about more aggressiveness, but maybe not as aggressive as the cage fighting, because they would still retain some aspects of, you know, spirituality. They might bow before they beat your ass or some shit like that, or, you know, like they'll do like a little bit more, you know, like call me sensei instead of coach or something like that. I mean, just a little bit more spiritual type of stuff, you know. But it all boils down to, you know, who you're learning from and what's within you, right? You know, I'm not gonna, you know, I can't say that. Like, there's no way I could say that every single Japanese teacher is not teaching the right way. I mean, you can't say that. There's got to be some quality teachers in Japan. There's got to be some quality teachers in China, and there's got to be some quality teachers in America. You know, but you know, the culture is so, they're so much motivated by aggressiveness and violence that they get that part of the expression of the martial arts gets the most attention,
right?
You know, but I don't really feel that the MMA and the cage fight will have too much of influence on China. I really don't. But in the same token, I don't live there, and I don't watch the news over there. I'm more concerned about what's happening here because this is where I live. Right. And when I encounter people and I see more and more people that associate martial arts with this cage fighting or violence in general, then it's upsetting to me because it really affects my business. But I've been having less encounters with that. I've been having more good encounters. Not as much, barely any like hate messages anymore. And I don't even really see it that much in the news anymore. Like, it's not even that big of a deal anymore. So it's not really like, there's not as much to protest about because there's really not much going on as far as that aspect is concerned. You know, and some people that went to MMA gyms, some of them train here now, and they're good people, you know, and it's not as serious as I thought, you know, as I took it at the beginning. You know, I think, you know, the whole ground fighting, you know, the whole BJJ thing, I don't see it that popular as much as before. People don't really make a big deal about it anymore, and that's what I always was promoting. Like, take the fight off the ground, you know, and people just naturally are more, you know, they get sick of things. You know, they see this is something new that they never seen before, and then they got excited about it. Now they're not excited about it anymore. Right. Like, I've seen that before. Oh, the triangle choke. Oh, wow, I've seen that before. You know, like the ground fighting. Oh, I've seen that before. They've seen it before. So now they're looking for something else. Maybe something that they haven't seen before. So maybe more spirituality within the martial arts is what is the next thing in line. to be big.
Hopefully.
Yeah, until it just goes back in a cycle all over again, you know. But it's just creating something a little bit different, you know, because you know the Chinese, you talk about Japan, but I know for sure China had those phases of where they straight up kill each other on the streets over the martial arts. They had that. They had to, for sure. Right. I mean, the movie Fearless, for example, you know, they would literally just fight to death. I mean, you know that happens in China.
Right.
They're used to. So they had those phases. You know, and then just Japan has its phases, and then America has those phases. But there's got to be a phase of spirituality. And it's happened in China, obviously, and you know it's happened in Japan because you got Zen. Right. You got meditation. Now, in America, I even read an article recently, like, it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry, these meditation apps. Yeah. Like, that's how important, or that's how much money they're making now. So people are heading towards meditation. Right. It's just that the meditation hasn't been integrated with the combat for martial arts just yet on a more global scale within America. And that's kind of what I'm trying to introduce, is because people are yoga is known for meditation. So you got these people that are headed towards meditation because they got all the stress going on. Mm-hmm. And then you got people that are headed toward, that are really into the yoga. And then you got people that are into cage fighting. But where is the integration of the meditation with the combat? And that's where martial arts, it still hasn't made it big yet. And that's what I want in America. I want this place to be where I'm making a bunch of money. Right. You know, hopefully it'll go there, you know.